Hey everyone, the pre-order trailer for Persona 4 Revival is out, and with it, a whole bunch of other information from the game's website. The purpose of this video is to catalog all of the important information that came with the pre-order trailer. The purpose of this video is not to speculate about aspects of this game that we have no inclination of yet. While I will be doing some soft speculation for parts of this video, for the most part I'm just going to try to keep stuff like that pretty grounded. I just kinda know the Persona fanbase has a very flirtatious relationship with misinformation, so I really want to catalog all of the major information we have right now into one video as reference material to curb the spread of misinformation about the features of this remake. I'll also be giving some of my personal takes on how I feel about some of the elements we see in this trailer, but even with that being the case, my opinions about the quality of this game and trailer are not the main focus of this video. Okay, first off, this new song sounds great, but I can't really tell what context it would play in for the game. It sounds like it might be a new battle theme, but it also sounds like it could be a new opening theme. It's a banger either way though. Alright, so in this scene we have a man in a raincoat looking up at the telephone poles on a foggy night. While the raincoat imagery is new, this is probably just Revival's version of the scenes in P4 where, after rescuing someone from the TV world, you would get an intermission of the culprit crashing out about you doing that. That's just my guess though. Either way, looks cool. So here we get our first look at the battle UI. Use HP bar is blue instead of the usual yellow, but the SP bar remains green. The outline of the TV returns as a stylistic UI element, this time it being bigger and yellow as well as offset a little, instead of a black outline like other versions of P4. We can see a little dial that would be on a CRT at the center of the command menu interface, which is very cute. Speaking of the command menu, which is using Xbox button prompts for this trailer, we can see the Y button is set to Persona, as it usually is. However, almost every other command menu option is assigned to a button that we wouldn't normally expect. X is attack, which is slightly reminiscent of metaphor, B is item, RB is guard, and A is assist. To be clear, assist is referring to the mechanic that was assigned to the right bumper in P5R that automatically selected a Persona attack for you to use based on the enemy's weakness. Pretty non-standard button assignments for a modern Persona game. I'll probably have quite a bit of trouble getting used to these because of my muscle memory from P3R, but we'll get used to them. Here we get a look at Igor and Margaret in the Velvet Room, with Igor very noticeably having the same exact portrait that he did in P3R, which is fine. We can appreciate asset reuse here. I don't really have much else to say about this shot other than I really like the depth of field effect that's applied here. Here we have Narukami awakening to Izanagi. I'm going to give the game a very hesitant compliment here. I've personally found the anime cutscenes in Persona very lacking for a long time. Some of them can look very good, but for the most part I find a lot of the 2D animation rather subpar in modern Persona games, especially given how few anime cutscenes there are in these games. P3R especially had some really rough looking cutscenes. However, while this is only one cutscene, and while it is cut up for the sake of the trailer, I can say that Narukami's awakening here looks significantly better than what I would expect out of most modern Persona anime cutscenes. Again, this is only a small look at one cutscene, but for now I'll just say that this looks very appealing. Here we get our only look at the pause menu UI in this trailer. Given how Atlus must know how much of a flex their pause menus are, I wouldn't be surprised if they're saving a full detailed look at the pause menu for a future presentation, which really isn't something I can say about the pause menus for any other JRPG series. This is the status screen. It looks like the visual gimmick for this screen will be all of your party members posted up on a staircase at Yasogami High. The party members not currently selected appear as white silhouettes, while the party member you currently have selected will appear as a black and white version of their model. Once Yukiko is selected here, the game zooms in on her model and transitions into a 2D black and white portrait of her. You don't need me to tell you that this whole thing looks very good. It's a Persona game. It seems like black and white is a color motif that's going to be quite present in Revival, even though it wasn't in previous versions of P4. I quite like it. It gives your eyes a break from the bright yellow of the rest of the game and fits in quite well with the TV aesthetic, being a reference to black and white TV. Finally, before we move on, I want to take a look at the levels of the party members here. Specifically, that Chie is at level 15 while Narukami is at level 23. The large gaps between levels here suggest to me that there will be no XP share in Revival, staying faithful to previous versions of P4 and following the design philosophy of P3R, which also opted out of having XP share. That being said, much like P3R, there could be some sort of XP catch-up mechanic that is introduced to the game at some point, though if that mechanic does exist, we are given no inclination of it in this trailer. Here we have a hangout event between Yosuke and Narukami. I would like to take this moment to point a couple of things out. First, let's touch on the English voice acting. Like most people had suspected, the English voice cast for the party members seems to have been completely recast from any previous version of Persona 4. It seems like this game is taking a fairly conservative approach to this new voice cast, in the sense that it sounds like most of the party members are sound-alikes for previous English P4 VAs, being specifically directed to do their best impressions of those previous VAs. This is an approach that I'm fine with. Most of the VAs here sound very good, and while I'll miss the previous cast dearly, I'm overall optimistic about what the new VAs will bring to the table. However, I would like to make the observation here that while Yosuke's new VA does sound very good, he's one of the two party members who doesn't seem to be doing an impression of their original English VA. While I can't figure out who the new actor is by ear, they seem to be doing a much deeper and serious take on Yosuke's voice. This got me thinking that maybe due to how controversial of a character Yosuke can be, because of how he occasionally acts towards other party members, especially Kanji, that they may be toning that side of his personality down in favor of shining a brighter spotlight on the more mournful and quiet parts of Yosuke's character. This is, admittedly, mostly baseless speculation on my part. Occam's razor probably applies here in that Yosuke will probably have more or less the same personality that he did in previous versions of P4. I just found the change in voice direction interesting. Sounds good either way though. The second thing I wanted to point out about this scene is the closest I will get to an objective criticism of the quality of this remake in this analysis. In Persona 3 Reload, environments in the real world often looked flat and empty. This was due to the very faithful nature of that remake. Environments in the original version of Persona 3 were quite barren, and in the interest of being as faithful to the original game as possible, Reload opted to not add much more detail to these areas when rebuilding them from the ground up. This, however, came with the unfortunate downside that the visuals of these areas did not meet modern standards, with a lot of the areas feeling very empty, lifeless, and basic. I initially thought this wouldn't be a problem with Revival. Base P4 already has way more cluttered and detailed environments than P3, meaning that even if the devs took that same faithful approach with P4R that they did with P3R, the environments would look more lived in by default. Further, the devs now had an opportunity to take in criticism of the environments in P3R and use that criticism to improve the visual design of the real-world environments in P4R. That's why I'm quite disheartened to see that this scene with Yosuke in the food court looks really barren. No discarded food trays or soda cans, no people, no nothing. Just flat and clean as far as the eye can see. This is unfortunate, however all hope for good-looking environments isn't lost. As we'll see when we take a look at the game's website, there are quite a few areas in the game that actually do feel appropriately cluttered and lived in. Furthermore, this game does have 8 months until it releases. There's plenty of time for the devs to make these more empty areas more detailed if they want to. Next we get to see a hangout event with Chie. Chie's hands look a little too big here, but for the most part she looks great. 4K Chie. Let me take the opportunity to offset my criticism of Revival's environments here with some genuine compliments about this shot. For one, whenever nature or water was depicted in P3R, it looked quite awful. This wasn't too much of a problem in P3R as you don't actually see these types of environments that often at all in that game, but Yakushima looked really rough at parts. The beach itself looked fine, but once you chased Aigis through the forest, the greenery just looked awful and the waterfall looked like it was made out of liquid metal. Really bad stuff for a game made in modern day. However, here in Revival, we can see quite a bit of greenery that looks very good and realistic. Good job. We can't see any water in this shot, but later in the trailer we'll see some, and it looks pretty great as well. Another compliment I'd like to give to the visuals for this shot is the camera composition. For a very long time, Persona's text-based cutscenes would consist of very similar fly-on-the-wall type shots where the camera would be pulled back and above the characters. This would be the case for a very long time until Metaphor released, which I personally consider to be a Persona game. Fight me. Metaphor's cinematography in text-based cutscenes was a lot more varied than the mainline Persona series, especially with its relatively ambitious close-up shots. In this trailer, we see scenes composed almost entirely of close-up shots that are from different angles than previous versions of these same scenes from P4. I like this a lot. I think these close-ups look good, and it's nice to finally have some variety in cinematography for Persona's text-based cutscenes after so long. I also quite like Chie's social link music notes here. They look better than P3R's music notes, and they feel like they fit in very well with P4's aesthetic. Next we have Narukami running down the central shopping district. The north and south parts of the shopping district seem to be connected into one map without a loading screen, which is very nice quality of life. We can also see that instead of a fixed camera like previous versions of P4, we instead have a free camera. We'll later see the Samagawa floodplain in this trailer, and that too has a free camera instead of a fixed camera. This is a very different approach from P3R, which opted to have a fixed camera in most, if not all of the areas that had one in the original game. This ultimately isn't much of a big deal, I just think it looks neat. It'll at the very least give people who have gone through these areas hundreds of times before the ability to see these familiar landmarks from a slightly different perspective, which is fun. I think this will cause some slight awkwardness, however, as most of the interactable elements of the map are still located on the left side of the street. So even though you can now look at the right side of the street, it doesn't seem like there'll be much to actually see there. Not a big issue, but worth pointing out nonetheless. We can see a text UI element in the top left of the screen. This will probably function the exact way the email function did in P3R, where you will get invitations from social links and job offers periodically from your phone. At the top right of the screen, we can see an objective tracker, which I really don't like in Persona games, but whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Looking at the minimap, as far as I can tell, these are all the same interactable events that were in P4G, with the question mark being the side quest giver in front of the bookstore, signifying that at the very least, the way you pick up side quests will be the same as P4. We can also see what is presumably Marie's social link icon above the side quest, which makes me a very happy boy. Next we have the Samagawa floodplain, renamed Samagawa River. Here we can see, just like how the north and south sides of the central shopping district were connected, the street and river will also now be connected in Revival. It's also raining here, which looks very good and appropriately moody, which is important to get right in a remake of Persona 4. Here we can see the fishing minigame, and hey, would you look at that? The water actually looks like water. Wow. Anywho, most of this UI looks extremely similar to how the fishing minigame looked in P4G, so it'll probably function pretty similarly here. Next we have Narukami singing karaoke with Yosuke, which I had to triple check wasn't already a thing you could do in P4G. My guess is that this will be an event where you can accept an invitation from your party members via text to increase their social link points, but your guess is as good as mine. Hey look! My favorite. I genuinely can't look at this scene for too long without getting a little emotional. I almost actually teared up when I first saw this in the trailer. I know some people in the Persona fanbase absolutely despise Marie with a fiery passion, but those people can fight me. I don't care. I'll stick up for Marie any day of the week. Anywho, Marie being here pretty much soft confirms that all Golden content will be included with the base game of Revival, due to the fact that so much of Golden's new content revolves around her. Everything else Golden introduced is basically quality of life that would have been included in a remake of this scale anyway. I can't actually place what this scene with Marie is. I don't recall seeing it in P4G. My friend suggested that this is probably some sort of new cutscene introducing you to her when you first see her in the Velvet Room, which sounds about right to me, but your guess is as good as mine. Here we can see Teddy, who is the only other party member besides Yosuke, whose new English VA sounds substantially different from the original. Though unlike Yosuke, I don't think there's a chance of this having any sort of significant meaning behind it. I think this is just a new voice direction for this character for whatever reason. Here we see a fully 3D animated cutscene of Chie being confronted by her shadow self. I imagine these scenes have been 3D animated this time around, not only to emphasize the drama, but also to evoke Persona 5's 3D animated awakenings, which are very iconic. These shadow confrontation scenes already evoke P5 awakenings if you played P5 first, so I think this makes a lot of sense. Also, Chie's new VA has a lot of range in this scene, really impressive stuff. Alright, so now we get our first in-depth look at battle. We're gonna be on this for a while. Get comfy. We see use cut-in, which instead of cutting away to a black void like in P3R, instead chooses to remain in the arena, which I like. Characters having blue eyes during cut-ins is carried over from P3R. We can see that this is Kanji's bathhouse dungeon, the battle arena for which looks very nice and detailed. There are some TV screens at the top of the arena showing the battle you're currently in, which is an awesome touch. Party member icons are lined up at the bottom of the screen horizontally. This may be surprising to people who expected them to be lined up vertically to mirror the original game like P3R chose to do, but as we'll see later on, they've still preserved that visual element elsewhere in this game. While the party member icons are in the style of P5, the actual party members themselves are surrounding the enemy in a circle just like OG P4. Here we see that Baton Pass has gone back to being named Baton Pass instead of Shift, like it was in P3R. I don't think this has any implications to the mechanics of Baton Pass in this game. It doesn't seem like we're getting those crazy P5R buffs for baton passing or anything like that. I think this is just a change to reflect that most people just called this mechanic Baton Pass, even in P3R where it explicitly wasn't called that. Finally, there's a blue partially filled bar on the right side of the screen. I'll go more into what this mechanic is when we get to analyzing the game's website, but for now just know that the bar seems to fill up by attacking enemies. Next we can see Yu getting ready to enter into a battle with a shadow on the field with absolutely massive arms. This time we're in Yukiko's castle. The environment for the castle looks suitably moody and has a lot of nice details like the cages, chandeliers, and chains. Looking at the minimap, it seems to my eyes that P4R will still have the randomly generated maps of the original game. Though whether or not there are any interesting additions to the layouts of the dungeons, we will have to wait and see. We can also see what seems to be the same icon for a golden hand from P3R at the top of the minimap. We can see here that the shadow goes to attack Narukami, but Narukami blocks the attack, stunning the shadow and opening it up to an ambush from the party to start the battle. This is a new mechanic for the Persona series. I imagine the reasoning for the inclusion of this mechanic was to prevent the problem from P3R, where you would often spend time waiting for a shadow to turn its back on you so you could get the jump on it. Next we see this absolutely beautiful arena with colorful TV screens lining the ground. The flashiness of this arena is being caused by the activation of a new mechanic called Prime Time. This is related to that blue bar we saw earlier, but like I said, we'll wait until we get to the website to cover all of that. In the top right corner of the screen, we can see Teddy in the new UI for real-time voice lines, mimicking a party member's face being on TV. This looks really cool and way cleaner than the real-time voice UI in previous versions of P4. Here we can see an all-out attack. This keeps the cloud of smoke visual from previous versions of P4, while also, in my opinion, looking way cooler than P3R's all-out attacks. There's just a great sense of momentum to this attack with all the party members running circles around the enemy. At the end of the all-out attack, Yu does a big sweeping attack that, as pointed out by Ultima on Twitter, is a reference to Yu's move Cross Slash from P4 Arena, which is cool. This attack looks a lot like a Theurgy from P3R, but I doubt it is one, since it seems to so clearly come after an all-out attack. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this. The common consensus I've seen online is that this is a special animation that will play depending on which party member started the all-out attack every time you do an all-out attack. To me, the animation seems a little repetitive to see every time you do an all-out attack, something you do a lot of in Persona, especially when there's presumably also still splash screens after all-out attacks, though we don't see any in this trailer. I don't know, let me know what you think this mechanic is in the comments, cause I'm kind of at a loss. Finally for this trailer, we get the release date for Persona 4 Revival, February 18th, 2027. About 8 months away. I don't think the wait for this game is going to feel as long as you might think. For one, P3R had a pretty aggressive marketing campaign with main trailers, character trailers, blog posts, and behind-the-scenes footage. I think we're going to be pretty well fed in the information department in the months leading up to this game. Secondly, Atlus has been really demo happy recently. Metaphor got a pre-release demo, P3R got a post-release demo, Raito Remastered got a demo, SMT Vengeance got a demo. I gotta be honest, I think it's more likely than not that we'll get a pre-release demo for Revival, given Atlus's current obsession with them. I know the release date says February 18th, but I honestly think we're going to get our first chance to play this game at least a couple weeks before that date. Get hyped. Alright, moving on to the Persona 4 Revival English website now. Under the About section, we are immediately greeted with the cover art for the game, which is very, very nice indeed. It marries the OG P4 cover art and the P4G cover art very well. Below that, we have an image of Narukami, Chie, and Yosuke all posing and looking all cool with some very clean art of Narukami in the top left. I'm not entirely sure what this is, but to me it looks like it might be a victory battle screen without any of the UI enabled. At the bottom of the page, we have our pre-order information as well as information for what is included in various editions of the game. I'm not personally interested in covering that, but if you are, you can pause the video here and take a look at what's included in the different versions. Moving on to the story section, we are immediately greeted by the outside of Yukiko's castle. The fog spilling onto the ground here looks very nice, which I know is very important to some OG Persona 4 enthusiasts. Below this, we have some beautiful character portraits for Narukami, Yosuke, Chie, and Yukiko. My only complaint here is that these portraits, as well as most of the screenshots on this website, are very low resolution, which is a shame. Below the party members, we have a page that's probably going to update with more sub-characters as more information about the game gets revealed. For now, this section only has Marie, but hey, that's all I need. Moving on to the Features tab, we're immediately greeted by a screenshot of the skiing vacation from Golden, confirming further that Revival will include most of, if not all, Golden content. Also, Yukiko's hair is clipping through her jacket, which is fun. Below this, we have some screenshots of Narukami selecting dialogue options. I actually like the UI for selecting dialogue in this game way more than I do in P3R. Makoto's face kind of looked awkward to me there, but Narukami looks all good here, and the yellow gradient bar that comes in from the right side of the screen is very pleasing to the eye. The different portraits even have different expressions, which I don't think has ever been the case before for a protagonist dialogue choice portrait in a Persona game. Well, except for P5 in the interrogation room, but you know what I mean. In the screenshot where Narukami is answering the teacher's questions, we can see that, like P3R, Revival will have portraits for teachers that previously had none. Also, they kept this teacher looking just as insane as she did in the original, which is very much appreciated. So it has admittedly been a while since I've played through the beginning of P4G, but I don't remember Narukami being as flirty with Chie as he is here. Like, there's no normal dialogue choice there. You must flirt. Again, I might be misremembering, but either way, this is a good time to point out that similar to how Makoto in P3R had his personality influenced by the personality of Makoto in the P3 movies, Narukami might also have a personality influenced by his personality in the P4 anime in this game. I don't imagine many people will have a problem with this since that anime, as well as Yu's portrayal in it, is so beloved, but it's worth pointing out. I certainly won't be complaining. Below we have some images of Narukami in the library and at band practice. The only reason I bring these screenshots up is to point out how, despite my earlier complaints, these two areas actually look very appropriately cluttered and busy with NPCs and props. Below this, we have a screenshot of Yukiko's first social link rank up. The UI here looks very clean and good, no notes. There are 5 social stats in this game, which matches the number of social stats from P4. The names of the social stats are also the same, they're just ordered differently to match P5's equivalent social stats. In the battle tab, there are some pretty good explanations of mechanics we both did and didn't see in the trailer, so I'm just going to read the explanations verbatim. First, let's look at Send Them Flying. When there are 2 or more shadows present, landing a normal attack on a shadow that is afflicted with a status ailment has a chance of sending them flying. If the knocked back shadow collides with another shadow, it deals damage while also spreading the ailment. This is a sicko mechanic. I'm down for it. Moving on to Prime Time, activates when the gauge filled during battle reaches its maximum. During this mode, you get a series of consecutive actions, all skill costs are eliminated, enemy resistances are ignored, and baton pass is freely available. Top it all off with a flashy series finale that deals massive damage. It's all upside, so when that gauge fills up, don't hesitate to use it. This looks like Revival's replacement for P3R's Theurgies. It seems a little less busted than Theurgies since it's 1 meter for the whole party instead of individual meters for every party member filling up to a unique super attack for each one. However, given the amount of buffs and advantages that description of Prime Time listed, I don't see it being much less busted than Theurgies. You're still probably going to be able to steamroll a lot of encounters with this mechanic. I don't have anything to say about the screenshots covering the Velvet Room, other than there's something about Narukami staring into my soul through this doorway that just really gets to me. It looks like the damn mom I threw up meme. Alright, that's all for now. Before I leave you, let me briefly go over what I plan and don't plan to cover about Persona 4 Revival going forward. As much as I'm going to enjoy the hype cycle for Revival, I only plan on covering news that contains something to analyze, i.e., for most of the trailers, which will probably just be cutscenes that you've seen before but with better graphics, I'll be getting hyped, but I probably won't post about them. So realistically, unless there's some big news close to this game's release, I'll probably only be covering the next trailer, the pre-release demo if Atlus chooses to release one, and maybe the P4R developer livestream on June 18th. It's for those same reasons that I won't be covering the Persona 6 announcement teaser trailer. I'm excited for the game and I want to see more of it, but there's nothing really for me to analyze or catalog about that trailer. Talking about that trailer would essentially just be me daydreaming about what I want Persona 6 to be, which is not something I'm interested in doing right now. Anywho, let me know if there's anything I missed or if there's anything I was mistaken about in this recent revival news cycle. That's not engagement bait, by the way. I actually want to hear your thoughts. I'm interested. Alright, my name's Casey, and you've been a wonderful audience. See you around.